Well, before we handed it over, you were thinking that if Serbia could produce, that they could go well in the competition. Did they produce enough today to convince you that they can?
Well, for an opening game, I think they've done all right. I think they controlled the game for most parts of the game. Second half, they looked a bit more solid at the back. I don't think the keeper really had a save to make. And they won it with a moment of brilliance. And I just feel that they've got a few players who can produce a moment of brilliance in their team. And this is, we've seen Argentina, we've seen France. They didn't find it easy to get in the tournament. So I think it was a solid first game, starts with the campaign, and 3 vital points.
What about Costa Rica? I mean, they had to chase the game when they went a goal down, and even still, they couldn't really pose a real threat to Serbia. And considering the other teams in the group, it's going to be very difficult for them from here on in.
Felt it was going to be difficult anyway. As soon as they go a goal down, the whole shape, the tactics go out the window, and it doesn't suit the personnel that he's got available. They've got all the endeavour, all the will in the world. They leave everything out there that they've got a real unity, but in terms of what's available in ability-wise, they are very, very limited.
What about Serbia in midfield? We know what Matic brings to the table, but there seemed to be a little lack of creativity there today, did he? I mean, to go further in the competition, surely they'll have to be a little bit more creative and a little bit more adventurous going forward.
Yeah, they have to. For the possession they had in the first half, you expected a bit more in the final third, but I just feel that in Tadic and Kostic, who didn't really have a good game when he came on, these are usually talented players with plenty of pace. Milinkovic-Savic showed in glimpses in the first half, not so much the second half, what he's capable of. And, I think it'll be a lot of weight off the shoulders because everybody expected them to win. They were the favourites today. Yeah. So I think they've got the personnel to do it. And obviously with Mitrovic up top, we'll touch on him in a bit. They've got a player there who just roughs teams up. He creates space for the other people. He must be one of the most awkward centre-forwards to play against. Yeah. And I think we see Serbia in a better light in the next few games. And as I said, the way they celebrated afterwards, they seem to be a real unity. And I just feel that they've got a lot of players on the wrong side of 30. I just feel that they feel this is our last chance really to put a marker down in a World Cup, and hopefully it's this year. Just
looking at another 1-0 result in the broader context, I remember during our build-up to the start of this tournament, we were looking back at the 2014 group stage results, and there were goals flying in Brazil, left, right and centre. There were 3-1s, 3-0s, 5-1, 4-2. Very common scorelines during the Brazil World Cup in the group phase. It seems to be a little bit tighter here. Is there any particular reason for that, Keith?
I think just coaches are recognising what they've got at their disposal. Certain teams can't play in that open fashion. Costa Rica, we've seen today, they have to set up to frustrate the opposition. They have to be well drilled defensively. They haven't got a lot going forward. They're limited. They really are limited, and they have to grind out results. This was the biggest game for them. They had to get something from this game if they had any hope of getting through the group. I give them practically no chance now. And now they've defied the odds in 2014 with the group they're in. I just cannot see this squad of players doing it now. And I agree with Didi in terms of Serbia. Pressure going into the first game. They too would have known, playing the Swiss, playing the Brazilians next. Difficult to get up and running, and we've already seen bigger nations really struggling in their first game. They've done enough today.
Yeah, has that become a bit of a trend in football, Didi, that teams are setting up in a very defensive fashion, particularly against the more fancy teams, and therefore limiting the number of goals we're seeing and making it difficult for the more favoured teams? I mean, we saw France struggle yesterday, we saw Argentina struggle a little bit yesterday.
The minnows compared to the bigger nations, I think they've got to play that way. If you look at Australia, for example, they haven't got the abundance of quality that other nations, that France, for example, has got. So you can't take chances, because if you haven't really got... the hardest thing is football is to score goals. If you haven't got an awful lot of talent going forward, you've got to make sure that if you score 1 or 2 goals, it's enough to win games. And that means that you make sure and you put the emphasis on the defence. And this is why, I'm not too surprised that we see not many goals in the first few games, because we had some very big nations with a great and rich history playing against smaller nations. Argentina, Iceland, Australia against France. So it shouldn't be too surprising. I think it'll open up, because in the second and third game there'll be teams who need to come out and force a result and try to force the issue. But I'm not too surprised. I find it disappointing sometimes when the bigger nations are not too adventurous, because they have the talent, they have the the opportunity to play players and be a bit more adventurous. That's a disappointing thing. If Costa Rica comes here and defends for large parts, Iceland, Australia, I've got no problem, because that's the only way for them to get results.
Yeah, and we've also seen quite a number of goals so far from set pieces. The Ronaldo free kick stands out. Kolarov's free kick, which was equally as good today, it stands out. We saw a penalty in the Croatia game. You know, we've seen probably more than usual. Will there be a greater emphasis now, Keith, do you think, on set pieces, because they're so important?
They very much are, and if you have a free kick specialist on goal, set piece from corner kicks, if you have a decent size. Serbian set pieces today were actually quite poor, barring that unbelievable strike from Kolarov. They had easier chances in the game. Mitrovic went through twice, 1v1, should have scored, although his performance was very good. If you have someone within your ranks able to deliver ball like that, makes such a difference. Yeah,
set piece is hugely important these days in the game, and no wonder Gareth Southgate has insisted that England practice penalties so much in build-up to the World Cup. But that's not surprising as well, because they've been very unlucky in penalty shootouts, as we know. But that's for another day's discussion, of course. Now, we've got to look back at the moment that changed the game and got the points for Serbia. And Mitrovic, a huge contributor to this.
Yeah, our man of the match, I think. He wins the ball here. If we look at it, it's 5 yards into the other half. He gets pulled back. He could have gone down there. He doesn't. He carries on 20, 25 yards, and then he gets brought down about 27, 28 yards from goal. And I wonder that in the back of his head, he thought, if I do go down after being pulled back, it's no good to us, the free kick. He gained another 25 yards. And then he was in range, or it was in range for Kolarov.
Yeah.
And it's an exceptional free kick. We know, we've seen it time and time again. He's got a wand of a left foot. But as I said, I think Mitrovic knew full well what he did when he carried on playing. And when he did go down eventually, he knew that might be in range for Kolarov.
Yeah, so not going down easily paid dividends for Serbia. You were fairly irate with the way the Costa Rica wall reacted to that free kick.
Well, you work for 2 years to get to a tournament like this, and it's a lot of hard work, it's a lot of effort, a lot of team effort. If we see the two guys in the middle of the wall, you know, I've got no sympathy whatsoever, because first of all, they turn their backs away, they turn their heads. If you stand in the wall, you've got to watch the ball, and you've got to be going up and be strong. And if you have to take one on the head, you know, you're playing in the World Cup. This is a disaster, as Keith rightly said. They had to get something out of the game today if they wanted to qualify. If they get a draw today, or even win the game, they've got every chance to go to the next round. Now, two guys don't want to get hit on the head in a World Cup final game, the first game, which is hugely important. And, you know, if you can show it again, you've got to keep the eyes on the ball. You've got to go up, got to make yourself big. They both turn away, and exactly that's where the ball goes through. And I've got no sympathy whatsoever. I would have a strong word with them afterwards. I think this has to be addressed. I'm not sure whether the manager mentioned it, because this should be addressed before. As you rightly said, set pieces are hugely vital these days. It gets harder and harder to create chances from open play, so these things get harder, and it gets also more important to defend them well. And this should be addressed by the manager before the tournament and in the qualifying campaign. And you shouldn't have a situation where two players go up in the wall and are scared or worried to get a ball on the head in a World Cup final.
Basics of football, basics requirements.
I was just thinking about the Ireland team you played in. There's no way you'd turn your back on a free kick, that's for sure.
We seen it the other night with Ronaldo's strike. Jordi Alba actually jumped out of the way and not throwing his body in the way. Basics, body on the line, dying for the cause. And it surprised me really from the Costa Ricans.
Yeah, I want to get it. If I stand in the ball, I want to get a hit on the head, because I know I'm safe to go. You know, so it should be, the mindset should be different. It's like, go and hit me, because then I know at least it's not going on goal, and you stop the free kick. And it's, you know, details and little things decide games. Yes, Serbia was better, but if that doesn't go in, you know, it was, 65, 68 minutes played, you've got another 20 minutes. And the longer the game goes, the more chance, obviously, you've got to get a result. And, it's surprising. It's not the first time we see it. No. Unfortunately, I don't think it's the last time we see it.
And it sounds like it could be a very minor issue that could very easily be looked over by a coach. But is that the sort of minutiae that the good coaches go into, Keith, when you're preparing for big matches?
I think you have to, especially with a squad of players that aren't particularly talented and inferior to the opposition that you're mainly going to face in this competition. So the set pieces as a whole, the defensive structure, set pieces for and against, little details. I know Didi wasn't happy with the wall when Ronaldo scored from the other night. half a yard. These are the types of details you're talking about that make such a big difference to the results.
How much more structured is the game nowadays than we'd say the 70s and 80s? We remember the great free-flown World Cup of the 1970s in particular, and that magical final between Brazil and Italy, and the way the game was played then. But is the game far more structured and planned these days, Didi?
Well, I think for one, it's you've got more information about the opposition. You know, you would have played in the 70s, you would have played against teams or players you probably never heard or never seen them play. So that surprise element is gone. Everybody knows what the other one does. There's enough footage of every player all around the world available to everybody. And then it's, I'd say it's more structured. I think teams are more cautious. You know, they identified and realised that if we want to have a chance against the big teams, we've got to shut up shop first and maybe try to nick a goal off a set piece. But then again, we still see things which we may have been used to 40 or 50 years ago, but not these days, because as much as the game might be structured, the game today was decided by a piece of brilliance by Kolarov. But it shouldn't have happened from the Costa Rican point of view, because if they were a bit braver in the ball, it wouldn't have happened. And it's surprising to me, with all the footage available, with all the data, all the technology they've got and research they do, that something like this actually still happens in the World Cup.
Yeah, well, one thing they would have done their homework on, but probably didn't make any difference in the end, was the threat that Mitrovic presents, and what an awkward, difficult customer he can be for any defence, and he proved to be that this afternoon, didn't he?
He's had a very impressive second half of the season at Fulham. Big move for him to go into this tournament in good form, and he's the focal point. They struggled to find him a lot in the first half. He should have scored here. Havas stands up well, reacts well, but he'll be disappointed that he hasn't got 2 goals today, really. This is one of the few occasions that he actually orchestrated a good chance, good opportunity. Not the quickest, but he's sharp in his mind in terms of how he goes about things. I thought he set the tone from the second half, and this is, again, the lead up to Kolarov's free kick. Dropping back in at the deep-lying midfielders, you see 4 of the 5 defenders still in place, but he's not content just staying up alongside them. Again, rescues the situation, drives forward for his team, relieving the pressure. They're 1-up at this stage. This type of centre-forward play, myself and Didi have played in the same position, is priceless. Someone who can carry the ball up the pitch, relieve the pressure, buys a free kick here, again, stops the momentum that the opposition are building.
Does it also allow midfielders to get forward after Mitrovic?
Oh, very much so. You get your whole shape behind that up into a shape. If you're playing in a box-to-box midfielder, you can go and support them. If your centre forward isn't getting hold of that ball, you have to play in a more cautious fashion. You have to think, well, that could bounce off him. With him in the main, it sticks.
So midfielders love a centre forward who can hold the ball up, and also
absolutely.
Okay, Didi, we're going to have a look at some of the Serb chances. One of the concerns they may have after today's game is the fact that they didn't take something from play.
Yes, but again, I think they'll be delighted with the 3 points.
Sure,
they know later on in the tournament, I think they've got to be more clinical. You know, this is you can miss a target. A player with Milinkovic's quality, you've got to try to hit the target. If you miss it, don't miss it by that far. Here again, they maybe play 1 or 2 balls too many. And then it's a great touch by Navas, because Kostic is there to put the ball in the back of the net, and Navas gets a fingertips to it. And Kostic can't adjust because he's too close to the ball, obviously, to knock the ball in. But they did threaten. I think at times like this, they were a touch unfortunate. And they will know that they have to be more clinical, because against Brazil and probably Switzerland, they may not get as many openings as they did today.
No, and is it likely that they'll sharpen up too as the group phase progresses and they get into the heat of more competitive matches?
100%, because you never know going into a tournament. You can play friendlies what you want, but they wouldn't have played a competitive game for a number of months now. So you don't really know, as good as preparation was in the warm-up games, you don't really know where you stand, you know, and then it's a first competitive game in a while, and
it's the coach's first competitive game, obviously, as
and
well.
Also,
so you never know what way he's going to react to it. He's introduced some of the younger players, nerves, that cohesion. But Didi's right in terms of taking the chance. I'd be surprised if Mitrovic got those 2 opportunities in the next couple of games and didn't take them.
And you saw their reaction at the end. You know, they waved everybody, coach, physios, the whole team behind the team to come in the middle there, the huddle. It showed what it means to them, for one, and I think they are delighted, and they should be, because it was a a potential game where you slip up. You know, don't forget what they've done 4 years ago. You know, they've done it to other teams, Costa Rica, but Tutaya felt that, yeah, they did enough to win the game.
Yeah, certainly every single player there is the envy of every single aspiring young footballer around the world. They're at the World Cup, and they've got to make the most of it. There was a slightly chaotic end to the game. We're going to have a look at the shenanigans that went on the sideline. I don't know what this was all about, but Brian probably described it best, that old cliche, handbags.
I just think it was much ado about nothing. Matic doing what he does best, covering.
Yeah.
Then it just slightly
He got
kicks
fairly
off.
irate though, Matic, didn't he?
He did, yeah, because Costa Rican staff get involved, flares up. I thought the referee actually dealt with it in a very composed fashion. Who's pushing away there, I'm not so sure. But he was tested at times today, the referee. But this one just, okay, yeah, much ado about nothing really. Costa Rica, it's their throw, and I'm not quite sure why Matic is trying to get the ball, because it's not actually his throw in.
Yeah, and if anybody needed the time, it was Costa Rica, not Serbia.
I think when he tried to get up, I don't think he thought, the free kick wasn't given. So I think he wanted to take a quick free kick and maybe take advantage of the situation. But yeah, you know, I think it showed what it meant to both of them. So you know, I don't think we mind a bit of a push and a shove.
No, a little bit of passion
And they
shown
shook
at the end
hands
of the game.
afterwards.
Yeah,
That's what matters.